about Christ and Buddha. The image of the ego as a vessel leads to the important idea of being a carrier of consciousness, i.e., an incarnation of transpersonal meaning. Okay? Two main archetypal figures have represented this idea in world culture, namely Buddha and Christ. We are fortunate to have two such figures. With two comes the possibility of comparison and objectivity. As long as there is but one figure embodying supreme value, he can only be worshipped but not understood. With the presence of two, we can discover this separate third thing which they both share. Understanding and greater consciousness then become possible. What Christ and Buddha have in common is the idea of being a carrier of consciousness. Characteristically, the image emerging in the West represents the standpoint of the ego, and that deriving from the East speaks from the standpoint of the self. Together they reveal a pair of opposites. The crucified Christ and the meditating Buddha represent consciousness as agony and consciousness as tranquil bliss. Total acceptance of the bondage to matter on the one hand and total transcendence of the world on the other. United, they picture the two sides of the carrier of consciousness, which, that kind of does it for me, because I've been going to these Buddhist meditation groups. My wife has been doing it for 20 years, and I say, what? To what end? Where, okay, we can meditate about the about mind, and we can say, oh, mani padme hung, everything is one, that's all well and good. But to what end? And so he sort of summed it up here, which is, it's the opposite of a Western way of thinking. Right, and it's both. It's both things, and that's what Edinger is getting at. So let me just read a little bit more. Okay, so God is now to be carried experientially by the individual. This is what is meant by the continuing incarnation. Okay, so he says on page 90 of this book, if the individual stands over against the primitive Yahweh effects within him, if he allows them to live without repressing them, which is depression, and without identifying with them, which is inflation, if he struggles to extract the images of meaning that lie embedded in them, if he patiently and diligently seeks the way of individuation, which the conscious both reveals and withholds, then his efforts will have a gradual transformative effect on Yahweh. He will be offering himself as a crucible for the transformation of the dark God and contributing his widow's mite to the cosmic drama of continuing creation. I really like that. That's sort of sums it up, doesn't it?
But Jung, he didn't mention the Virgin Mary in there. Jung mentioned that it took the Virgin Mary image of Sophia to not balance, but moderate Yahweh.
Yeah. Okay. Yahweh was moderated in the lap of the Virgin, right?
Right, which came later.
Yeah, that's what.
It's historical.
Okay, that's right. That's what he said.
Does he talk about that here?
Not right here, but I read that within the last 4 hours. Okay. So here's a quote from Jung, from C.G. Jung speaking, which is, "We all must do just what Christ did. We must make our experiment."